Hello there, and welcome to the fifth episode of the From a Certain Point of View podcast. I'm Josh,
I'm Adam.
and we are excited to be talking Star Wars with you guys once again. And this episode might be a little shorter than most because Adam is heading out on an adventure, so he's getting ready to go. So we got to get this episode in.
yeah, kind of getting ready to head on a vacation, so we're recording this in between, doing all the last minute stuff and packing and all that. So,
All right. Well,
yeah,
thank you for finding time to squeeze this in for us.
yeah, no problem.
So, do we want to go ahead and start with our introductions of what we've been watching, reading, and playing in Star Wars this week?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Do you want to get us started on that?
Yeah, so it's kind of been a busy week, holiday week, and then like I said, getting ready for vacation. But I did finish reading Thrawn, which is the latest in my effort to catch up on new canon stuff, and definitely enjoyed that. And I love Thrawn as a character. I loved him back when the heir to the empire and that trilogy, and just love his tactical knowledge and how he just corners his enemies. He's always 3 steps ahead of everybody, and I love seeing him back in new canon stuff,
Hmm.
especially Rebels and things like that. I love him as a character, so it's good to see him back.
Yeah, he's a great villain. I haven't really gotten into the Thrawn novels yet, but I think at some point I definitely plan to.
Yeah, it's cool seeing his rise to power, and it kind of ties into what happens in Rebels a little bit as far as this first book goes.
Hmm.
There's two more, and then he's starting a brand new trilogy after this. So
Right. Yeah, that should be interesting too.
yeah, lots of Thrawn stuff, which is never a bad thing.
Hmm.
And I've been watching a couple Clone Wars episodes, and I've actually been playing a lot of Battlefront 2 this week, uh,
Nice.
which
How are
is
you? I know you were a little sour on Battlefront 2 when it first came out. How are you feeling about it now?
no, I'm enjoying it, and it still wasn't a $60 game for me, so I'm glad I waited on it.
Yeah, I
But
can't
I
blame you
did,
there.
yeah, I started playing it because I started playing Jedi Fallen Order on PC,
Hmm.
and when I did that, I signed up for EA's Origin Access Premier so I could play Fallen Order and some other games, which is
Yeah,
included in their $15 a month subscription plan. So for
gotcha.
$15, I was able to play all of Fallen Order, and then I figured I might as well jump into Battlefront mainly for
The
the
story mode,
campaign.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that
But
kind of
then
ties into the Emperor a little bit, right? If I remember correctly.
yeah, with Operation Cinder, right? So
Hmm.
but yeah, and then yeah, yesterday with being Black Friday, it was on sale for $8. So I figured, whenever the premiere sub is up, I might as well just keep Battlefront for $8. So, but
Yeah, can't beat that.
but yeah, I don't think for me it was a $60 game, but it's definitely an $8 game. So
Yeah, anytime I've jumped on there and played it, I've definitely enjoyed it. Again with online multiplayer games, I can get a little frustrated with those, but I
yeah,
definitely love
definitely.
just jumping in there and
And I've
you
done a
know,
little bit of online multiplayer, but it's mostly been story and co-op. Actually,
yeah,
I
yeah,
enjoy co-op, doing the AI with real teammates and stuff like that. So
right. Yeah, I enjoyed the story mode for sure, the single player mode, and just the story behind that as well. So I'm actually thinking about going back and playing the single player campaign just to get the story
yeah,
kind of leading up to Rise of Skywalker here.
yeah,
So.
definitely, probably worth it.
Hmm.
So what have you been up to?
Well, I've been watching a lot of animated stuff. I finished up the Mandalorian plot with the Clone Wars and Rebels. Um, just wanted to get as much background information on Mandalore and the Mandalorians as I could, just since the Mandalorian is on Disney Plus now,
Yeah, definitely.
um, and just getting to know some of the those characters like Pre Vizsla and Bo Katan, and learning more about the dark saber and all
Yeah.
that good stuff. So I've been enjoying that, and also been watching Star Wars Resistance, and this show again, it's not for me on the level of Clone Wars or Rebels at all, but I do enjoy it at times, and when it ties into like the canon stuff or the First Order stuff, it's interesting. So,
Okay.
um, the main characters went to this planet. something to the effect of Ashas or Ashas Re, I think.
Okay.
Where there was actually a Jedi temple built over top of a conquered Sith temple. And so they go into the temple, and it's discovered that it's a Sith temple, and there are some Sith artifacts that they come across, and they introduce these characters known as First Order Raiders,
Interesting.
and their job is actually to search for Sith relics. So I'm guessing this is like for Kylo Ren. So
Or
I thought it was.
Palpatine.
I think they're trying to tell us something here with this, that maybe
Yeah.
searching for Sith relics is going to be important to the story, possibly in Episode 9. So,
That could be.
yeah. So I think that might play a role, possibly. I don't know if we'll see First Order Raiders or anything in the movie, but I think just Kylo Ren searching for,
and right,
things like that.
Yeah, and definitely the like I said, the Sith relics that could come into play.
Yeah, so I think that
Thinking
might
specifically
be telling
of
us
maybe
something.
a certain dagger that we've been
A
seeing.
certain dagger, possibly. Yeah. And then the only other thing I've been doing was playing some Fallen Order. And I'm probably about halfway through the game at this point, but I did decide, against your wishes, sort of like Luke Skywalker didn't listen to Yoda in The Empire Strikes Back. I didn't listen to you, and I went to Dathomir
Yeah.
to
Okay.
get my double-bladed lightsaber, and it was definitely a challenge. I don't think I was ready
Okay.
for it yet. I think I should have listened and completed my training. But I did finally make my way through all of the villains on that planet and get my double-bladed lightsaber, which is awesome. So
Okay.
I'm
Cool.
enjoying that.
So, kind of like Luke, you got your hand beat off a little bit, but you made it out alive.
Exactly.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So anything else that we've been doing this week?
Yeah, I don't think so. You ready for news?
Yeah, let's punch it into the news.
Cool.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
Okay, so our first piece of news is about The Rise of Skywalker, and we have a confirmed runtime. J.J. Abrams says it is around about 2 hours and 21 minutes. So, Adam, what are your thoughts on the runtime of The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's plenty of time. You can do a lot of stuff in 2 hours and 21 minutes. It's not the shortest that the franchise has ever seen. It's not the longest, so I don't have any problem with it.
Fair enough. Yeah,
I think some people want like a 4-hour movie, but 2 hours and 21 is perfect for Star Wars. I think it's right in the wheelhouse.
Yeah, I don't think that I wanted it to be as long as like Endgame or anything like that. I think
Yeah, right.
I was expecting it to be closer to maybe like the 2 hour 30-minute mark, or right around where Last Jedi was, just because I think there's so much that they need to wrap up, and it looks like from what we're seeing that there's so many different locations that they're going to, and there's so much going on with this story, for at least from what I can tell. So, I wonder, like, is this enough time?
Yeah.
I don't want anything to feel rushed or like there's kind of too much going on and not enough time. But yeah, so that was my only thing. But I think this is a fine runtime, especially for a Star Wars movie. Like you said, it's right up there with some of the other ones.
Yeah.
So yeah. I guess with so many, I don't know how many different worlds we're going to in this movie, but I'm just like, how are they going to cover all that?
Yeah.
That's the only thing I'm
I
thinking.
get that. Yeah, I get that complaint. Worry, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
And it's kind of making me wonder again if we're going to see. And I don't know that I want to see this. I think if they do this, I'll be okay with it, just because we're getting something else you can do with the Force. But I'm wondering about this whole Force traveling thing. Like, we saw Kylo Ren kind of. It almost looked like he was on Octu when they were about to touch hands, and I don't know if that was just kind of a camera trick, or if he was really able to like almost be there? Are we going to see them being able to like kind of travel through the forest to these different planets since we're seeing so many of them? Or are they actually going to fly in ships to all these different? Because we have like Pisana, we have Kijimi, we have the jungle planet in the beginning. We have Kef Bur, which is the
One of the
moon where the
moons.
Death
Yeah.
Star wreckage is. We
Right.
have that world where maybe the Emperor is. So it just seems like there's a lot there, and yeah. So I've been wondering
Yeah.
about if we're gonna see that type of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I
But,
mean, Revenge of the Sith kind of covered a lot of planets in a short amount of time.
yeah, I did go
So
back
I
to
don't.
Revenge of the Sith. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know.
and think
I'm not
about
too.
that. So
I'm not too worried about that part of it. I guess.
right.
I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's one of those. I guess it's one of those things that we just have to wait until the movie comes out to see how that all ties together and plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, the impression I got from the interview with J.J. Abrams was that they kind of, through the editing process, they were like, okay, we don't really need this. We can cut this down a little bit. So it seems like
Right.
they have cut the movie down, trimmed the fat, maybe, so to speak. And
Yeah, I mean, for me, it kind of goes back to the Mandalorian stuff, where I'm not too worried about runtime lengths for all these episodes, just because I'm totally digging the story that they've been dishing out so far. So that doesn't really
yeah,
take away
yeah,
from my enjoyment of it. So I'm hoping that Rise of Skywalker kind of follows in that same idea.
yeah. As long as they can tell the story and tell a good story, and it doesn't feel rushed, like, and we'll get into this, but last night's episode of The Mandalorian, I felt was the perfect length. I mean, it told the story that it
Yeah,
needed to.
right.
It didn't feel rushed. I didn't think about the length of the episode or anything like that. It just was a contained story, and
Yeah, yeah,
so yeah, absolutely.
right.
So moving on to our next piece of news, and this is kind of like quite a few things and
So
rolled up into one
the
here.
mashup. Yeah.
With the marketing campaign of the Rise of Skywalker, the floodgates have opened. TV
Yeah.
spots are running wild. We've got a clip out, behind the scenes stuff. So,
Yeah.
do you want to talk about any of that stuff, Adam?
Yeah, let's dive into it. I watched some of the TV spots. There's some pretty exciting, there's some pretty exciting new footage in there. There's
Yeah,
some
what have
pretty
you seen that's
exciting
jumped
use
out at you, Adam?
of. I mean, the weirdest thing is the biggest thing that jumped out to me was Duel of the Fates is back.
Duel of the Fates.
That was
Yeah,
pretty. I was not expecting to hear some of the notes of Duel of the Fates jump in at the end of that. Was that Duel?
that TV spot is called Duel.
That was the Duel one. Yeah. So
Yeah, so very intentional, obviously, with the music
yeah.
that's being played in it. And I'm not surprised by it, but I love it because I read something where John Williams, maybe it was John Williams' brother, even, or somebody talking about the score for this movie and how it was
Yeah.
going to pull in themes from the other movies and everything.
Okay.
And I think Duel of the Fates has to be in. I hope it's in the movie in some way, even
Right.
if it's just kind of musically alluded to in some subtle way. But I think this is my favorite TV spot of all of them so far.
Yeah, it was definitely it was great. I guess maybe Duel of the Fates surprises me a little bit because it's not really like it's part of the saga, but it's not really one of these Skywalker centric
Right.
pieces of music,
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Whereas like Battle of the Heroes, that's an Anakin piece of music, and then you have the Luke theme, you have the Leia theme, you have all that stuff that's like specifically Skywalker stuff. So,
sure, that theme doesn't really tie into the Skywalkers, other than maybe if you want to kind of say it was played during Revenge of the Sith when Anakin and Obi-Wan were dueling.
A little bit there, yeah.
But yeah, and when Yoda and the Emperor were kind of dueling there as well at the same time.
Yeah, right.
But I think for me, the thing that not only did the music jump out at me there with that spot, but also the voiceover from the Emperor saying this is the last word in the story of Skywalker. what does that mean? Like I'm wondering what he means by that.
Yeah, there's a lot of theorizing there that we can get into. And
Yeah.
speaking of theorizing, we're going to do our Rise of Skywalker theory show the week before, so be on the lookout for that. We're going to cover all this type of stuff. So
Yes, I'm very anxiously awaiting doing that. I'm so excited to dive into the
you've only
theories and
got
predictions. I
you've
think
only got
we
2
should
more
do a whole
weeks. Yeah,
episode on that.
you've only got 2 more weeks after this, so we're getting
2
there.
more weeks. All right.
Yeah.
The other thing that jumped out at me on this spot was seeing Rey on what looks to be Octu,
Okay.
looking at a burning TIE ship
Yeah.
of some kind.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Not really. I don't. Yeah, not really. I would just be making guesses at that point, I think. But it's an
Yeah, I mean,
amazing looking shot, though.
it was a great shot, and what I loved about it was one thing that I really have been wanting to see is Rey with her hood up like a Jedi. I know it's a simple thing, but like, just like seeing Luke in Return of the Jedi walking into Jabba's palace with the hood up, and like I want to see that from Rey in this movie, and it looks like we're getting that. And also just a return to a planet is kind of a theme in Star Wars, where in the prequels, Anakin returned to Tatooine, Luke returned to Tatooine, and we have
Dagobah. He returned to
and
Dagobah.
Dagobah. Yeah, and Rey returning to Octu, and usually there's some kind of motivation behind returning. Like Anakin was going to save his mother.
You think we'll go back
Luke
to,
was going to save Han.
You think we'll go back to Jakku?
I don't know if we'll go back to Jakku or not. I would like to, but I think it's interesting that she's going back to Octu, and I'm wondering like what her motivation is behind that, and we see this burning tie. Does it have something to do with Kylo Ren or Ben, however you want to identify him? Is she going back because she's failed in some way, and she's trying to speak to Luke or something like that? But I can't wait to find out why she's back there.
Yeah, definitely.
So then we had we had another spot earlier in the week, and I don't know if we mentioned it on last week's podcast.
We mentioned it, but it had just come out like a few minutes before we started recording, so I hadn't got a chance to watch it at all.
Yeah, it was kind of our first look at the Knights of Ren.
Yeah,
which was cool as well.
Second look, I guess.
Yeah.
I got into a couple Twitter conversations with some like news outlets that said, "Hey, it's our first look at Knights of Ren." I'm like, you should go back and watch The Force Awakens.
Yeah, we did get a flashback, short, very quick, brief flashback shot of the Knights. But I think that in this movie, they're obviously in the present and involved in some way in the story. So
yeah,
exciting stuff. And then we had a behind-the-scenes kind of reel. Did you watch that?
Yes, it did.
And anything you want to say about that?
We got a cool little look at Warwick Davis. In an Ewok costume. Are we going to see Wicket
again? And that
again?
didn't look like a young Warwick Davis from Return of the Jedi days.
And if you look around, like I was looking around in the background, that stuff does not look like it was 80s.
Right.
80s era.
Yeah, so this looks like a more current shot, and why would he be putting that on if he was not going to be in The Rise of Skywalker?
It's interesting, yeah.
So, are we going back to Endor, Adam?
Well, I would think that we would at least be around Endor.
Yeah.
Because, like we said, Kef Burr is kind of where the Death Star wreckage is, and that would all happen around Endor, or maybe some of the moons of Endor.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
It's very possible we could see a couple Ewoks, and I want to see that. I'm really excited about that.
I want to see it all. I want to see Ewoks. I want to see Anakin back.
Yeah,
back. I want to see it all.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't at me. I want to see all that stuff.
I'm good with that. I want to see it too.
Hell, bring Jar Jar back. I don't care.
Yeah, why not? Anyway. Could even have Darth Jar Jar. Who knows? Maybe he's the Emperor's apprentice.
I hate that name.
Yeah, I know. So anything else from that behind the scenes reel? For me, it was
Nah,
just cool.
nah.
Like it was just I loved
Yeah,
seeing the
I love seeing that. Just like I love seeing that stuff. But yeah, it's cool seeing Warwick as an
yeah, and
Ewok.
even the
Yeah.
way they opened it with kind of the blooper reel sort of
Oh, the Han.
Luke and Han
Yeah,
and Alec
yeah.
Guinness looked like he just wasn't having any
He
fun at
just
all.
doesn't.
He was not amused.
He can't wait to be done with it.
He was not amused by the antics of those youngsters. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was just great looking back and then looking to the present as well, and just
Yeah.
the behind the scenes look. So I love that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, anything else from the Rise of Skywalker marketing or news or anything like that?
Not yet. We'll see what this week brings, though.
All right. Well, I think we're ready to go into our reviews segment of the show. Do you want to hit the cue?
My disappointment in your performance cannot be overstated.
Okay, well, with our reviews segment this week, we're going to hold off a little bit on a couple things that we've been reading and playing. So, as far as Jedi Fallen Order goes, I'm probably about halfway or maybe a little bit more through that game. Adam, you've finished it, correct?
Yeah. I finished it.
We're just going to wait a little bit to give a full review. So, be looking forward to that. And then Resistance Reborn, I am at the 75% mark on my Kindle, it's telling me. And you've finished that as well, right?
Yeah. I listened.
So
to that
we'll
one.
just we'll hold off a little bit on the full reviews for those two Star Wars things. So
Cool.
But we're going to now jump into the Mandalorian Chapter 4. And Adam, do you want to give your overall impressions of the episode before we get into spoilers?
Yeah, sure. So this episode, it was kind of like episode 2, where it was a little bit more of a standalone story, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. And I don't think it was a total standalone story.
Right. It was sort of
So
like a side mission type thing.
a little
but,
bit, but this one had a point. Not that
Yes.
episode 2 didn't have a point, but I think that this one had a pretty important point. And like I said, we'll cover that in a bit. It's kind of getting a little bit of blowback. Like maybe it was one of the weakest episodes so far, and I don't know about that either. I really enjoyed it a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I laughed a good bit through this one.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of on the edge of my seat at the end of it, and
Yeah.
I didn't really. There's good character development in this one. Some great action sequences.
For sure.
Seeing a particular familiar vehicle from original trilogy stuff was pretty exciting. I really enjoyed this episode. Again, I loved it.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think my overall impression is pretty much the same as yours this time around as
Okay.
well. And I really enjoyed the episode. I thought it was solid. It wasn't like one of my favorite episodes yet, but I thought it was a very solid episode, and I definitely enjoyed a lot of what happened here.
I'll tell you one thing that I've seen this week online, and that I kind of want to address here because I think
Sure.
it needs to be. I've seen some comparisons because Bryce Dallas Howard directed this episode.
Yep, correct.
Which is Ron Howard's daughter.
Yes.
And I've seen some comparisons between his directing of Solo and her directing of episode 4 of The Mandalorian, and I gotta say that's just that's a dumb comparison. Ron was brought in at the end of Solo to kind of quote unquote, I guess, fix what happened before.
Right.
So he kind of really inherited that at the end to do rewrites and to kind of breathe some different life into that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people did not like Solo. And
right.
I think that maybe those comparisons for those reasons are completely off base.
So I'm just curious what those comparisons were, because for me, I didn't see that at all. I didn't make that
Okay.
connection whatsoever.
I don't know if it's some of the groups that I have been in, like on Facebook, or maybe looking through some Twitter replies or things like that. But it seemed like the connotation was that Bryce Dallas Howard was a quote unquote better Star Wars director than her father, and
Okay. Yeah.
Just simply because Ron had his name attached to Solo, which I thought was a fun addition to the Star Wars universe, if maybe a bit unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, I did.
But
it wasn't
like
a completely necessary film, but
right. But like
the
I
more
said,
I watch it, the more I enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, he kind of came in at the end of that, so it's not
Yeah.
really totally his movie.
No, and I think he did a fine job
Yeah,
of kind of pulling it together and getting everybody to finish, the film.
I think Solo gets a bit of blowback just because it was the first movie back after Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Which we know was very divisive. But,
right.
But I enjoyed Solo. I don't, it's a good film. I enjoyed Mandalorian episode 4. But as far as those comparisons go, I think everyone just kind of needs to keep that in check a bit.
I'm with you, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit with our points of view segment today as well. Yeah. Are you ready to dive into the spoilers for The Mandalorian Chapter 4?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so Chapter 4 of The Mandalorian is titled Sanctuary. Adam, any thoughts on the title before we dive in a little deeper?
So it kind of gives us a good idea of not only what this episode's about this particular town, being a sanctuary. It also kind of gives us an idea of what the Mandalorian's trying to look for at this particular point in time. He's looking for a place to keep this kid safe.
Yeah.
For me, I think that's why this episode's important. It's not just about this one little story. It's about his overarching goal for this kid, and why maybe it's a bit of a pipe dream.
Yeah, I mean, I think he feels obviously very protective over the child, Baby Yoda, the kid, whatever you want to call him. And I think it's interesting that he's looking for sanctuary, but there really is no sanctuary, at least on this episode, because we find out that, there is a presence here that is kind of a threat. And we also find that there are still, bounties out there on Baby Yoda, and they found the location of him by the end. So
and like you said, not only is it not safe just because of the things that are happening within that planet itself, but there's outside dangers too, and those dangers aren't going away.
Exactly. So going back a little bit to the opening, I thought this was a great opening of the episode. It was kind of a cold open in a way where we actually, this is one of the few times where we don't have the Mandalorian present in the scene. And, we just have this kind of peaceful village and these interesting looking fish and other creatures. And then we see kind of this raid on this town. And my first initial reaction was, are those Uruk-hai?
They look very much like orcs. Yeah.
Yeah, they reminded me of the Uruk-hai
I thought the same
from
thing,
Lord of the Rings. And they didn't have the white hand of Saruman or anything, but
right.
But I thought it was a very cool scene and a very cool opening, just establishing the threat on this world.
Yeah, definitely, and it kind of played to your heartstrings again as well, with the mother and daughter. Mother protecting the daughter as these raiders are all around them. They're hiding in this little puddle river thing with just a basket over their heads.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love the opening, and then we see the Mandalorian flying in, and kind of he actually named the planet that they were going to, which and maybe
fun.
it's just, and maybe it's because Mando had somebody to talk to about what he was doing. So it made sense in that for that dialogue for him to say, okay, this is where we're going. It looks like we can lay low here. And just love the shots of him flying in and landing on the planet and
Right.
and everything.
What do
And
you think of Baby Yoda pushing all the buttons?
oh, that was great. I forgot to
Wasn't it?
mention that.
Wasn't
That
it?
was
Yeah.
just so funny. Him just sort of looking right into his eyes and pushing the button in defiance was
And then total
was
dad
amazing.
mode where
Yeah,
Mandalorian picks up the Baby Yoda and puts him on his lap, and
right, right.
You're gonna sit here with me now.
Yeah, it was great. Just love the dynamic between these two.
Yeah.
So we land on the planet and then we go to another kind of cantina or type setting
hmm
on the planet, and we're finally introduced to Cara Dune.
Yeah.
So what did you think of the introduction of this character?
It was very interesting, and it's interesting because I don't know how much we'll see her going forward, but I'm sure they'll run into each other again.
Yeah,
But it doesn't seem like it's going to be a main character of the series.
right. Again, just
But
like IG-11, I think we're having these run-ins with these characters that he
Yeah.
comes across, comes in interactions with. But this is the Mandalorian story, and these other characters are
Right.
just side characters, pretty much. We don't have
right.
any other real lead characters that are going to be in every episode other than maybe Baby Yoda.
Yeah, definitely. And we find out she has some history behind
Yes,
her as well, tying into being involved in some other events. She was a former trooper, I guess. Right.
right. Now, did you get from this that she was an Imperial trooper or a Rebel trooper?
All right. So
Because he mentioned like shock trooper or something like that, right?
he mentioned shock trooper, and then later in the episode, the rebellion came up that she was maybe part of that.
Yes, yeah. So I was a little confused by that.
I was a little confused too, and I don't know if that means that she defected. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah, she could have. I like the little kind of introductory fight scene between the two of them,
Yeah.
as well. And then they're like, you just want to eat some soup.
And they say that because Baby Yoda just kind of happens to stumble across them going at it pretty hard. He just stands there slurping on his soup.
there slurping on the soup. And, just all the moments with Baby Yoda were great this week.
Yeah.
He just kept showing up even when
I think we have to go. I think we have to go back a bit too because after Mandalorian lands, he kind of has a sit and stay moment.
He's like, sit, stay, don't touch anything, and then as soon as he opens the door, he's right there beside him, and he's like, "Oh, what the hell? Come on, let's go."
Yeah.
So yeah, just again, great comedic moments and.
Yeah, and again,
that just
like,
pull
I love
on your
the
heartstrings.
comedy in this. This is Star Wars comedy for me.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, they've really nailed the Star Wars comedy here.
Yeah.
So the Mando's kind of feeling like, oh man, there's basically a bounty hunter here already. Not exactly a bounty hunter, but this planet's taken, is what he says. Like, there's not room enough for both Cara Dune and I. But then we have kind of they almost get hired for this job to protect this village, I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and Mando isn't too keen on taking this job until he finds out that there might be some sanctuary involved in it.
Yes,
that's the payment that he's looking for.
Right, he's looking for somewhere that he can stay with and take care of the child and have it be kind of in the middle of nowhere. So that takes us to the village where the woman. Do you know the woman's name that was asking him? Okay. But she's sort of the mother.
Yeah, same woman from
in the beginning
scene. Yeah, the mother.
Yeah, and she really and Mando really gets questioned about his helmet in this episode.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, and like, what happens if you take it off? Well, and he says you can never put it back on again.
Yeah.
basically. And which I found interesting because watching the Clone Wars and watching Rebels, we have a lot of Mandalorians without their helmets on.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is this an inconsistency or a plot hole, or is this like an intentional, like they maybe changed their
I
ways or
don't know.
something?
I would have to look into that more because I'll be honest, I don't know a lot of the reasons behind all that.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's more of a like a planetary like those are Mandalorian citizens, and then later the tribal aspect of it brought in some more ritualistic stuff.
Right, that could be. And I was wondering if even maybe since whatever the Great Purge is,
Hmm.
if since that point in time they're like, okay, we've got to protect our identity, we've got to keep our helmet on or something. Who knows? But
Because and we have to remember at this point, like I said, this is more of like a tribal thing. Like even the Mandalorian isn't actually from Mandalore, because he
yeah, we
says
kind of
in this
find that
episode that they found him and they
he
took him in.
he was taken in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was interesting too.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some important reveals in this episode about him in particular.
Right.
And
But
we
then
know
it's
for sure
interesting
that
for
his
him
parents
because
died.
right, because then he, when he's offered some food, he does take his helmet off,
Yes, so he does.
and it
He just
seems
doesn't
like
take
he's
it
in
off.
plain view because he's sitting right in front of a window where kids are playing, and he takes off his
Right.
helmet to eat.
And maybe he knew that they were like having fun playing their game and they weren't going to look up or something like
Possibly,
that. But
yeah.
unless he's just kind of testing the waters of possibly kind of laying down his Mandalorian
And I
kind
think
of
that's some
beliefs.
interesting stuff in this episode. We'll get into this later, but we see some conflict in him about
Hmm.
who he is and maybe who he sees that maybe he could be.
Right. Absolutely. And so the next thing for me that I kind of, and again, both of us, we've only seen the episode once, so just kind of going from memory here
Yeah.
of them finding basically the tracks of an AT-ST walker.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finding, okay, why is this here? This is something that's from the Empire, we need to look into this and make sure, the village is protected and everything. But then
it's interesting because they at this point they're kind of scouting after being quote unquote hired.
Yeah.
And then they find these AT-ST tracks, and at this point they're pretty much done with this job.
Right.
Because this is something that the village knew about, and when they were hired they weren't told about. So
yeah,
it's kind of
and basically I didn't sign up for this type of
it's
thing.
kind of
Yeah.
big detail that was left out of the initial job description, but
Yeah, it was left out of the deal.
yeah, so at this point, Mando goes back and just says, "You guys just need to leave.
Right.
It's not safe here anymore.
We need to get out of here." And then there's like this whole idea of, we've been here for forever basically,
Yeah,
and
there's a tradition involved here with them.
yes, a lot of tradition, and we're not leaving basically. And because this is who we are, this is where we live, and it's just for them not possible almost for them to leave.
And Cara Dune just disagrees completely.
Mhm.
She's saying this is nuts. You guys don't have the
Yeah.
experience to do this. You need to leave.
Right.
But then Mando kind of caves,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, we could teach them. So,
Yeah. So then we get this
get
whole
the
kind of
Rocky
like
scene.
training sequence,
Yep.
where they're practicing with blasters and with sharpened sticks, and
And another thing I found interesting: the only person that has blaster experience was this girl's mother.
yeah. That was curious about like how does she know how to use a blaster?
Right, and I don't know if we'll see her again. Maybe we will.
Yeah.
But she has the wherewithal to hide in the river with her daughter with a basket over her head.
Mm-hmm.
She has the presence of mind to do that.
Yeah.
She seems to almost be a leader of this village.
Right.
She takes a Mandalorian in. She takes care of him and the baby. And then
Yeah, so I'm wondering
she
if we'll learn more
has
about her
maybe,
in the
and then
future.
she's the only one with blaster experience in the whole town. So
Yeah, pretty interesting.
right.
Um, and this was kind of for me reminiscent of Return of the Jedi in a way where it was kind of the Ewoks with
Yeah,
their ropes and sticks and
it's
logs up against the Empire, and
it's a
it's
David
kind
and
of
Goliath story.
it kind of felt a little bit like that.
Right.
And so we get into this action sequence where they got this plan basically of how they're going to lure the ATST over to kind of fall into this ground that they've cut away.
Mhm.
And it doesn't go exactly according to plan, and we have
Right.
some improvisation and everything. It was a pretty good action scene. Did you have anything you wanted to
Yeah, I
mention
mean,
about that?
yeah, it was a great action scene. The ATST looked amazing.
Yeah, it did. It looked great. Yeah, for sure.
Just the practicality of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like it was there. This is a small detail, but I love being able to look into the eyes.
Yeah.
As they're like windows.
Right. That was
Because
cool.
we know that's what they are, but you could actually kind of see inside, and the red lights in there just looked terrifying.
Yeah, it was interesting that it was red. It was sort of
Yeah.
like they
It's like
kind
maybe
of
like a modified ATST.
they modified this thing. It was like an evil ATST type
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty wicked looking.
Yeah,
So that
and
was
like I
yeah,
said, small detail, but just being able to see inside those eyes and see inside the cabin, just kind of a cool small little
right.
detail there.
And I have to say, I was so, as we get towards the end of this episode after that action scene, and Mando is considering leaving Baby Yoda behind. He's like, okay, we did the
Yeah.
job. That threat is gone. The child should be safe here under your care. Basically speaking to the woman that we don't really know her name yet. And then we see that Baby Yoda is in the crosshairs of some kind of sniper weapon. I was worried. I was like, oh my god, no, they can't.
Scared too.
They can't do this right now. I can't lose Baby Yoda.
Not just because of the bounty hunter. I was scared. I thought Mandalorian was actually going to leave Baby Yoda on this planet, and that would just kind of be
And that would be the end of that
arc,
storyline.
and that we'd
maybe
pick up Baby Yoda later in some other show or some other book or comic or something. I thought that really that might be the end of that whole thing.
I was also very worried about that.
But then the bounty hunter and having it has a clear shot on it, and then it's like another IG-11 moment where we cut away, we hear the blaster go off.
Yeah, but I was like, oh god.
But we don't know who's dead.
We don't know who's dead, and then it's the bounty hunter that was dead, and
Cara Dune is behind, and
yeah.
And
so
for me, this is the most important part of this episode. This is why I don't see this episode as a side mission.
Right.
I see this episode as it's definitely character development, because we get a lot of kind of under the helmet scenes with Mandalorian, not just when he takes off his helmet, but when the leader of this village, the girl's mother, invites him to stay. He kind of I don't know if he wants to.
I think he's kind of thinking about it,
but it's kind of like attempted. He's kind of tempted at least.
Yes,
and
at the very least.
I was talking about this last night in some other groups that I'm in, but it's almost like he's, you live this warrior lifestyle, but then he comes across this town where he sees what a comfortable life can look like.
There's a different way of living,
Yeah, but it's not his way of living.
Right.
And, maybe he kind of sees the possibilities there and is kind of tempted by it, but he still feels that call to what his duty is.
Yeah, and I think ultimately
go ahead.
The driving force behind this is that he finds out that there really isn't a sanctuary for this child, and that he needs to continue to be this child's protector.
Yeah.
Which I was kind of relieved about, because I want these two together, you know what I mean?
And so that's where this isn't just a side mission. That moves the story
Absolutely.
ahead, because
Yeah.
this is the episode where he's trying to maybe hide, or maybe trying to maybe lay low and let
Yeah.
some stuff blow over. But we find out that he can't do that
Right.
in this episode,
Exactly.
because not only is there not really a safe place in the galaxy, maybe there's also nowhere that he can get away from the guild or whoever is looking for the baby at this point in time.
Yeah. So in
So
some way, he's going to have to resolve this himself, you know?
right, and that's what moves the story ahead. That's why this isn't just a side episode for me. This is a pretty important episode for the story as a whole.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you. And for me, this whole series is just fantastic, and it's such a credit to Favreau and Filoni and everyone behind it that we care so much already about these characters and what's going to happen. And I'm so invested in it. And so I also can't wait to just watch this, kind of binge it once it's all out there, and
watch it all
and
back
see how it all
back to
kind of
back.
feels back to back, you know.
Yeah. Cool.
But those are our thoughts on The Mandalorian Chapter 4. Did you have any other thoughts on that?
So last week we kind of gave a score. What's your score
Yes.
for episode 4?
We did. My score for episode 4, I think this one, you know, on just watching it once, my initial feeling on it is I would give it an 8 out of 10.
I'd be close.
Yeah.
Maybe 8 and 8.5, somewhere in there. So.
So that's where I'm at with this one. But I loved it. I think it's another worthy addition and a very important episode, like you said, and a solid entry.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. So moving into our final segment this week, our points of view.
Luke, you're going to find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
Okay, so moving into our final segment here, we have kind of just a short, brief conversation about an article that I put on our website called "The Rise of Toxic Fandom." You know, Adam, I guess just I'll be honest with you. The past couple years have been difficult for me being a Star Wars fan, just because I'm a person who kind of, you know, really enjoyed The Last Jedi. And even Solo on you know, it's not up there with my favorites or anything, but I enjoy it for what it is, and just, you know, going on YouTube, looking at comment sections, being on Twitter, and just seeing just the negativity surrounding Star Wars, and not only Star Wars but other fandoms as well. You know, I've mentioned Game of Thrones season 8 in the article, and you know, I've been a little grumpy and a little angry with some fans out there that just kind of pick everything apart, and just the toxicity that can exist in these online social media comment sections and everything. So that was kind of the reason I wrote this article. And I guess the main thing that kind of put me over the edge was this 30-second clip we got for The Rise of Skywalker, where we're on Pisana and we see Rey, Finn, and Poe and Chewie are on, what do we call, like a bar, almost like a
skiff, or like
a skiff or something like that, they're trying to escape the First Order, and we see these jet troopers, which I think are insanely cool, and Finn is kind of like, they fly now? Or I think 3PO even said it first. They fly now, and Finn asks, they fly now, and Poe's like, they fly now, which I thought was just funny. I thought it was good comedy. And also, you know, for these characters, this is the first time they've seen a flying stormtrooper, especially, you know, for the First Order. So, like I mentioned in the article, Poe didn't play Battlefront, so he doesn't know that there's jet troopers that have existed already in canon. And this is the first time we've seen it in the movies, but, you know, we had everybody online picking up it apart saying, oh, this isn't new. What are they talking about? And everything else. So I'm just like, okay, come on, people, let's have some fun with something. We don't have to kind of scrutinize and pick everything apart. But yeah, that's kind of where I was at with that, and why I wrote the article. Did you have any thoughts on or reactions to that?
To be honest, I saw that happening and I just kind of ignored it.
Yeah, I think that's for
And
the best.
yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years, and not just in Star Wars, but like you said, that kind of attitude exists in any fandom you're going to be involved in
Mm-hmm.
anywhere across the board.
Yep.
And for some reason, it's more present in some than it is in others. And I think that we have to remember that Star Wars is a multi-billion-dollar franchise
Yes, that's true.
with a lot of people
It's
that are going to
insanely
be
popular.
talking about this at any given time. And that's a great thing for the fandom because that
Mm-hmm.
means that it's alive and it's healthy and it's doing well, no matter what some people will tell you. The fact that it is that popular tells you that.
Yeah.
So it's not dead. Nobody's
Right.
killed Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's alive and it's healthy. But that also means you're going to be bringing in a bunch of different personalities to your fan base as well. And some of
That's
those
a good point.
personalities are more accommodating than others.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no excuse for things that happened with like Kelly Marie Tran
Absolutely not.
and things
Yeah.
like that. There's no explaining that. There's no way that is right behavior from anybody.
Right.
But at the same time, I feel like putting that on the fan base as a whole. And I know that you're not doing that.
No,
But-
not at all. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a
but where
segment of the fan base that
there's a
can be
vocal
toxic.
minority.
Yeah, there's a vocal minority out there that
And I
can
think
make
that,
things
yeah.
really not less fun, you know?
And I think that my point in this is that that vocal minority exists everywhere.
Yeah.
And that we maybe see it or pay attention to it a little bit more because we are very heavily involved in this fandom.
Absolutely.
And we kind of see that stuff happening as it happens. But for me, lately, I've been ignoring that segment of the fan base, I guess.
I think that's a very wise decision.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
helps things. I mean, it makes it more enjoyable for me. I don't have to worry about that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like I said, you're always going to see that, and I've seen that in different fan bases that I've been involved in over the last 2 years. It's present everywhere, and it's something that it can ruin your enjoyment of something that you enjoy if you let it.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to ignore it and not let it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where I arrived in my article was that okay, I don't want to let this, you know, ruin my enjoyment of especially episode 9 because I am very, very excited about episode 9. I mean, I love all Star Wars stuff, you know, with some exceptions. But for me, like the Skywalker saga, that's where it's at for me. That's where my heart and soul is. That's what I'm most anticipating. So
Right.
I think I've been more and more exposed to the side of fandom that can be toxic
Yeah, it could be.
lately, and I need to just kind of go away from that and maybe not go into those comment sections, not look at those Twitter feeds.
Yeah.
And
I've left some
just
groups
sort of,
that I felt
you know.
were more negative than others,
Mm-hmm.
where that kind of attitude was allowed to persist by whoever ran those communities. And I think
Right.
that as you and I are starting to build a community here, we're trying to focus on a positive community
Absolutely.
that allows disagreements, that allows different points of view,
Yeah.
but
And-
does it in a responsible way.
Exactly. And as I mentioned in the article too, like I think criticism is a fine thing. I think
Mhm.
criticism has to exist. I just think it has to be done in a respectful way and not in a way where we're you know, threatening or saying hurtful things about people, or we're not asking for remakes, or we're not boycotting. And you know, Star Wars will continue to exist, and it's okay. Like J.J. Abrams said, you don't have to like everything about Star Wars to love Star Wars. There's going to be some things here and there that we don't like or that we disagree with, and we say, okay, I didn't like that, but I really liked this, and kind of looking forward to the future of having more and more Star Wars. Because my biggest fear with toxic fandom is that it's going to drive people away from wanting to create Star Wars, not wanting to have to deal with that. It could have played into the Benioff and Weiss decision, of just not wanting to deal with that toxic fandom.
Yeah,
And
it could have played in a little bit. Yeah,
that's my fear.
So a couple things there. So first of all, as a whole, I think my point earlier, and this goes definitely to the JJ mentioned this term, and I know it's not JJ's term, but
Right.
the fandom menace term.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that type of term.
Yeah.
Because the fandom as a whole, I think, is very positive about this. They spend the money.
Yeah.
They go to the movies multiple times. They buy the books. They buy the games. They watch the TV
Absolutely.
shows. They like
And
to
I
talk.
can tell you
They like to talk
firsthand.
about it. And most of the fandom does not do things like people did to Kelly Marie Tran.
You're absolutely right. And I can tell you, going to Star
Like-
Wars Celebration for the first time in April was one of the best things I ever did, because
Cool.
it was so positive and there were
Yeah.
so many people there, and it was just this great energy.
That
and
is
it
the
was
fandom as a whole.
Yes, and that was amazing.
And we talked about this a few weeks ago. I did not like The Last Jedi when
Right.
it came out, and it's still not my favorite. There's still more things I think that I don't like about it than I do if you sat down and made like a pros and cons column.
Sure, and I
checklist.
can completely understand that for sure.
There's probably more cons than there are for pros for me. Like there are some pretty strong pros, but there's also some
Mhm.
pretty strong cons.
Yep.
But I never did any of those types of things that would label me as a toxic fan. But
Exactly.
there definitely seems to be this connotation among people as a whole that we can't disagree, and I don't think that that's true. And I also
Right.
don't think that I really don't like that fandom menace term, because most of the fandom as a whole is not that menace, and I don't like
Right.
labeling the fandom that way, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's mostly
not
mostly
only does
positive.
that really doesn't show what the fandom is about. That makes a lot more people that are really into this, that love the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of puts that label on them as well, because
Which is
they're part of
unfortunate.
that fandom. And I think what we're doing here is we're giving a name based on a small percentage of people that did some pretty crappy things.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think sometimes a few people that are vocal can stand out and kind of almost, I don't want to say ruin it for everybody, but kind of makes everybody look bad in a way,
Right.
Unfortunately. But you're right. I think the majority of it is positive, and a very strong fandom.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think the last thing I want to say about this is just going back to what George Lucas said about Star Wars being for young people. 10 to 12-year-olds, I think, and why is that? For me, it's that there is still this sense of wonder, this sense of acceptance of what this story is in front of me, and kind of not having this kind of jaded nature that you can acquire as you go through your years of growing up. And I think just getting back, even if you're an adult, no matter how old you are, finding that kid inside of you that just has this wonder and love for what's being presented to you. And if we can get back to that, I think we can always love Star Wars, even though there might be certain things about it that we don't agree with or don't like.
I think one of the things that most people have to understand, like you said, about this being a story for kids is it's just that. It's a story for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We can't expect we can't expect these crazy theories that we come up with to always come true, because
Right.
We are 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds that are
Mhm.
talking about this stuff. This isn't for us. This isn't
No.
our story anymore. We can still enjoy it. We can still
Yes.
love it. But this isn't really our story anymore.
That's right.
I don't know if you saw any of the Freddie Prinze Jr. Rant a few
I
weeks ago.
did, yes, and I did.
And it's very not safe for work. So if you guys
No, it's not safe at all
if you guys
for work
go
or for
listen
kids.
to this, be aware of that and be aware of who you're around when you listen to it.
Yeah.
But one of the points that he made was that this is a series of movies that were made for kids in the 70s and 80s, and then in the early 2000s, this was a series of movies that were made for a different set of kids.
Yep.
And now these sequels are movies that are made for a brand new set of kids.
Mm-hmm. That is the target audience.
This isn't just for us,
Right.
This is for enjoyment for other people. So
absolutely, it's a coming of age story, and
so
has deep themes that anybody could appreciate, but it's for those that have that imagination and that wonder and that have not been jaded yet. So yeah.
Yep. Cool.
But I think that about wraps it up for us this week, unless there was anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, let's head into our last little segment.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Okay, well, thanks again for hanging out with us this week. We hope you enjoyed the show. As always, remember to hit up from a certain point of view.com. We put all of our episodes up there each week. We have had 2 new blog posts this week, one of which we talked about in the point of view segment. That was Josh's article on the fandom. And I wrote an article earlier this week, kind of a Baby Yoda 101. So if you're interested in that all, make sure to check out the blog. As always, remember that we are also, if you're listening to this somewhere else, we're also on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify, as well as Pocket Casts, if you use Pocket Casts. And be sure to follow us on Facebook if you're not already. Follow us on Twitter. Check out the Discord server. We've been having some discussion in there again as well. So just make sure that you're connecting with us everywhere and that you can be part of the conversation too.
Thank you, Adam, for that, and thank you to all our listeners out there. We really appreciate you setting some time aside to listen to us, and we'd love to hear back from you. And if you have, any ideas that you'd like to share with us, or Adam, I was even considering, if anybody has any questions they'd like us to answer in future podcasts, maybe that's something that we could do. But, again, and thank you, Adam, for taking some time out before you're heading out on your trip here. And,
no problem.
And may the force be with you on that trip. And
cool.
Everybody out there, remember, the force will be with you.
Always.